So yesterday we learned how to factorize a quadratic function. We have actually another method of simplifying a quadratic function, which is called completing the square method. This is a very complicated method for some of the students. So I split this video into two parts, which is part 1 and also part 2. In this part 1, we are going to focus on just memorizing how to do a completing the square. If you really want to understand conceptually how does a completing square method works, you can refer to our video, which is the part 2 video later. So let's start with why do we need completing the square, or we call it as CTS. The main purpose of expressing a quadratic function into a completing the square form is because for us to identify the turning point. So for example, if you can see here, we are having x plus 2 square minus 3. This is already our completing the square form. So what information we can get here is actually the turning point. So the turning point will be a coordinate, therefore you have the x value and also the y value. How do we get the x value quickly? We will just get it inside the bracket here. We have a plus 2 here. So our turning point x value will be negative 2. So bear in mind that here it is very important that you must make sure you change the sign of this positive 2. So if you have a positive 2, you will change it to negative 2. If you have a negative 2, you will change your x coordinate to become a positive 2. However, your y coordinate of the turning point will be just straight away this negative 3 being dragged down to become a negative 3. Do not change the sign for the y value. So in order to get the turning point, we change the sign for the x value. We do not change the sign for the y value. So it will be having negative 2 and negative 3. So how do we actually do a completing the square? So let's say if we have a quadratic function which is x squared minus 6x plus 5, we are going to see how do we do this in 4 steps. So bear in mind this is a memorization, yeah? So if you want to understand conceptually, refer to part 2 video. So started off with a bracket, completing a square, so that we have a square here by putting here as x. What do we do for step 1 is, we will divide this negative 6 by 2. That's how we can get negative 3. Second step, we must put here as a negative. No matter what value you see, this must be a negative. And then we are going to have this value square. So you will have a 3 square here, and that will be your step number 3. Finally, step number 4, you are just going to drag down the final constant term of positive 5 completely down here. It will be a positive 5. And then you just have to simplify the whole thing. You will get a completing the square form. Let's look at example number 1 following these 4 steps. So started off, we have x squared minus 4x plus 7. How do we start off with is we are going to open a bracket with a square, and then we put an x here. Step number 1, we will have to divide this whole thing by 2. So therefore, I will have negative 2. Next step number 2 will be, we need to make sure this must be a minus no matter what. And then step number 3, we are going to put the 2 square here. And then lastly, step number 4, we are just going to drag the final term plus 7 at here. And then we are just going to simplify this. X minus 2 square, and then this is a minus 4 plus a 7. So therefore, this will give us x minus 2 square minus 4 plus 7, we will get a positive 3. So this will be my completing the square form. Let's say, in case they ask you what is the turning point of this quadratic function, you will be able to identify it quickly from the completing the square method. So this is the negative 2. Remember, x value we need to change the sign, so it will now become a positive 2. This y value is positive 3, so we will directly get the answer, which is a positive 3. We do not have to change the sign. We change the sign only for the x value. If the question didn't ask you for turning point, you do not have to write this. Okay, let's look at the second example. We have x squared plus 2x plus 5. So we started off again with a bracket and then square, and then we put an x here. Step number 1, we need to make sure this whole thing divided by 2, so therefore I have a plus 1 now. Step number 2, I must minus no matter what. Step number 3, I will do the 1 square. Step number 5, I will just drag down the last term completely, which is a positive 5, down there. Then I just have to simplify. This is x plus 1 squared minus 1 plus 5. So therefore my final answer is x plus 1 squared plus 4. Okay, let's look at example number 3. Example number 3, we have here x squared plus 4x minus 3. Again, we will start off with a bracket square with x. And then first, we have to make sure this is being divided by 2. So I have plus 2. Next thing is, step number 2, we must minus no matter what. Step number 3, we will do this square. So it's 2 square. And step number 4, we have to copy completely the constant term down, which is a minus 3. Then next, we are going to simplify. So this is x plus 2 squared minus 4 minus 3. So this will give us x plus 2 squared minus a 7. So therefore, this is our final answer for the completing the square form of our original quadratic function. So I hope you actually learn, and then let's watch the part 2 video in order to understand why is this completing the square having these steps involved.